Hi everyone. We are busy with theme 3 data collection methods, and this is the content that would have been covered on the 30th of July. And it focuses on the differences between quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method research approaches. Now, I have split the videos for this particular learning objective into two. The first part is focused on quantitative data collection methods, and the second part is focused on qualitative data collection methods. I thought this would make it easier for you to home in on a particular method that is aligned with your study and your topic. So if you are doing qualitative study, you will proceed on with this video as it unpacks qualitative research methods and data collection methods. If you are doing quantitative, you can pause this video and start with the quantitative video link I've also shared. If you are doing mixed method, then both videos would be of use to you. So in this particular video, as mentioned, we dive into qualitative data collection methods. Now, qualitative data collection methods would have been, or qualitative research would have been introduced in the first semester to you, and you would know that this consists of the worldviews of a particular participant that you are going to focus on. Here we strive for in-depth discussions and try to find out what their perspectives and experiences of a particular participant or sample population that you are focusing on, what their views, experiences, and interpretations are of a particular phenomenon. Now, in first semester, you would have learned about interpretivism and constructivism and the worldviews that include a range of perspectives. And these are referred to as approaches. Now, we're going to go through these perspectives first to refresh or reflect on them, and then we unpack the research methods that are aligned with each one. We're going to do a summary in this video. So once you identify the one that is applicable to your particular study and the research aims and research questions that you are envisioning, you will take a deeper dive into that particular content in your own time as well. So let's look at ethnography as a perspective. Here it's focused on social phenomena in the natural and cultural environment. This is naturally done over a lengthy period, often several months, and could even be years. So, what you want to consider here is that your study focuses on cultures and communities by immersing yourself into the environment and observe the behaviors, the rituals, and social interactions of your participants. The research methods that are generally used in ethnography is interviews, focus groups, field notes, participant observations, and unobtrusive research. We could also add artifacts and documents here as well. Next up, we've got phenomenology, and here it's the real world experiences that are applicable. So it explores everyday phenomena and participants' conscious awareness of their life worlds in the real world. It aims to understand people's perceptions and perspectives of a particular situation. So here it's the essence of phenomena as perceived by the individual that is key. The research or data collection methods used here is interviews, focus groups, could be field notes, and participant observations. We also in phenomenology can consider the diaries and journals. I often use in-depth interviews here as well as audio and video recordings. Next up, we've got the narrative aspect, where the chronicle stories and sequence events are focused. The narratives can be designed either in a biographical or autobiographical consideration, but basically, the study of narratives and storytelling is the key aspect here. We focus on the structures and the functions of stories and how they are constructed and interpreted. So the data collection methods here could be interviews, focus groups, field notes, and unobtrusive research. I further consider literary text here and media. Ground theory next is a phenomena that is aimed to generate theories grounded in a systematically gathered and analyzed data about a particular phenomena. Here, you create theory from the dynamic interplay between data collection and analysis. Our data collection methods here could be interviews, focus groups, field notes, and participant observations. I further consider, let me think, document analysis and memo writing as well. Case studies, on the other hand, studies a particular individual program or an event in depth of a defined period and examines certain systems and a particular, could be an individual or a particular group of people or a school or an institution. It depends on how you're going to consider and what your aim of your studies are. But it's an in depth exploration of a single case or a small number of cases within a particular real life context and often over a long, extended period of time. Now, if our studies takes, if we are going to consider it over a long period of time and go back to collect data more than once, we consider that as a longitudinal study. If we're going to collect data only once, we consider that as a cross-sectional study where you collect once and your participants only see you once. Generally, for your research study that you're going to collect data from, majority of us, next year when you conduct your studies, you are going to collect data once from your participants. And that will be a cross-sectional study. If you do go more than once and over a longer period, it would be considered as a longitudinal study. Now, if we consider the various research methods that are messaged or embedded in your chapter, we start off with the field research first. Now, field research, as you can see on page 209 of your textbook, it has a long history and has been used in a number of by a number of research over the years, researchers, and the field research involves collecting your data outside of the laboratory, outside of a library or workplace setting, and directly from the natural environment where your subjects exist or where your participants are existing. And on page 210, it gives us these three important aspects. You study your people in their natural environment. There's repeated interaction with the people over time, and you develop theoretical concepts based on an in-depth understanding of the perspectives of your people's participants or your participants' environment. It is important to note that here in this field research, we do extensive preparation. There's a research plan prior to going. We ask the necessary consent, and we have the needed equipment that we need, like our notebooks, our recording devices, etc., in order to collect the needed data appropriately. And then, depending on what the research methods are, you are going to consider observation, interaction, and data management on how you manage that particular data. But going into the field and collecting your data directly from the participants is key and often used by various researchers. Next up, we've got focus group interviews. And these are mentioned or starts from, just want to get to the correct page, on page 214 in your books, where in your textbook. And this is where the focus involves group or guided group discussions to gather diverse perspectives on a specific topic. So here we consider a group perspective in order to determine the attitudes, the behavior, the preferences, the dislikes, the experiences we mentioned earlier on, perceptions, and views of participants to determine their experiences regarding a particular product, a particular service, a particular television program, for example, depending on what your research study is about. It could consist of a small group of people and a facilitator so that you are able to interact and ask the needed open ended questions. If you are doing a quantitative study, you would ask closed-ended questions that does not give room to elaborate. But in a qualitative study, you want them to elaborate, so the questions are open-ended. You will consider the size of your group that's applicable, generally between 4 to 6 and up to 10 members, is from my experience in a qualitative study. But your supervisors will guide you and see what is sufficient for your particular study and the sample you've identified. Here you're going to have a discussion guide, and you're going to have probing questions. You're going to consider the setting where you create a comfortable, non-intimidating environment, and you'll have all the equipment in place, for example, to record and ensure that there's accurate recording, audio, video, and notes for your discussion in preparation for that data analysis that comes next. So, generally, focus group interviews are important and oftenly used by participants in a group setting. You can also consider individual interviews and in depth interviews that are one on one, and these are often a data collection method that allows you to pose a question to a participant with the aim of learning more about what their views, opinions, and beliefs are about a specific phenomenon. And it's a one on one conversation that explores a respondent's thoughts, their feelings, their experiences, and in a bit of detail as well. So, here you should have a structure as the researcher or facilitator. You have a semi structured interview generally, where the format is open ended and there's flexibility that allows the conversation to flow naturally as you cover the key concepts or the key topics. You build rapport and trust, generally, where you create comfort for them, for the interviewee, and understand the purpose of an interview. Your questions would already be structured or designed prior in an instrument format, and it will be open ended, as I've mentioned. You're going to probe for deeper insight and clarification if an answer is not given fully, or if you needed more depth or have a build on question from what you initially asked. You're going to also ensure that you've got the necessary equipment to take recordings. But initially, even before starting, there's always that consent form, and that you already have worked in your proposal. Ethical considerations is key, and confidentiality and protecting your participants' identity, and giving them the option to be anonymous and protecting their identity is important as well. So there are key considerations that follow next on page 219. And these key considerations are important as we conclude to move on to the data analysis. I'm not going to read everything to you, but there are aspects of questioning and how we design our questions that are quite important. An often mistake that I made was to ask long questions that ended up having a double barrel question, as bullet number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 indicates on page 220, where you ask a question that is almost twofold in its answer, or a question that gives the participant a gap to answer only one aspect, or not fully answer because the question is loses focus or confuses them. So the idea is to read through these aspects that are considered or should be considered when you plan your interviews, so that you structure your questions in ways that are precise, that are short and straight to the point, but allows for elaboration or probing where needed. So I'm going to leave page 220 for you to unpack, as there are various aspects that are key. The last bullet on page 220 that says ask truly open questions, and that I've mentioned quite a bit, so you are aware that in qualitative study we ask questions that do not lead the participant into answering it in a certain way, but the open-ended questions allows the participant to give their opinions and responses that are not influenced or predetermined by your cues or by your leading guided questions. Allow the participant to answer authentically. And I would have asked that you would work through these questions a bit more on page 1. Let me just see. Key considerations is on 290. Apologies for the typo on the slide. It's page 219. So generally, when we collect data, we collect it to a point where we need to interpret it to analyze that particular data. And so once we've collected our data, we are going to read over it a couple of times and identify themes that are embedded in that particular data. We're going to form themes and operational definitions that allow us to break it down into categories. And once we've got the categories, we're going to check that data against the literature and make the necessary links to the findings and the literature to basically allow us to tell a story or unpack and make the needed, can we answer the research questions that we started off with. So initially we're going to record or take down in whichever way you choose. It could be through an app that you're going to do it, or you're going to record on a Teams meeting, for example, and you're going to start off with transcriptions of those interviews, if you are using interviews, for example. And you're going to do a breakdown of your data collection. We generally have what we call a thematic analysis. And here we are going to form themes, as I've mentioned, and we're going to code those themes to identify key insights and patterns that we see in the responses of the various participants. And as I've mentioned, once you form those themes, you're going to categorize them and then check them against literature and see what is new, see what is repeated, and see where there's a gap or answers your research questions as well. So, in essence, we want to focus on preparation, detail our observations, remember ethical considerations, have a sense of flexibility and systematic data management. In focus groups, we want to emphasize that there's a group composition, and in depth interviews, that semi structured, open ended questions is what leads us or guides your particular research. Generally, the key or familiar methods would be research, field research, focus groups, and in depth interviews. Depending on what your research study are, familiarize yourself with these options and let's see where it unpacks and unfolds and leads your data analysis to. Next week, we will continue on with Research Proposal Task 3 before we unpack the second portion of data collection methods. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in the next live session.